the bus go round and round, round and round, round and round. The wheels on the bus go round and round, all through the town.
Theo Caldwell on In-Depth Radio, News Talk 1010.
Elegant in its simplicity. The wheels on the bus. One of the strongest. It's really Haydn wrote the original. It was originally George Haydn who wrote this. Look, this is the theme of tonight's broadcast. Theo Caldwell here. It's the theme. Getting around. Specifically driving. And we're also going to tie the notion of driving, of getting around, into the concept of personal choice. You've heard me say that socialists love people in groups of 1 million or more. And as part of that philosophy, they love buses and streetcars and subways and mass transit because they feel they should ship people in directions they ought to go. And you know that this program is a champion of individual choice because we understand here on the eponymously named Theo Caldwell program that an economy, a city like ours, I speak to you now from Toronto, but the world in general, it goes forward by virtue of millions and millions of people making individual choices. Choice! Are you pro-choice? Do you believe in allowing people to make their own choices in lots of aspects of life, including how they get around? Now listen, I wouldn't want to waste your time, and I wouldn't dare waste mine. So I'm going to tell you straight up, without any legal mumbo-jumbo, this is going to be a phenomenal broadcast. But here's something else you need to understand. You know how usually we go through the news of the week? We also have a theme with the music, which I've just extrapolated for you. I've just illuminated you as to the theme, driving, getting around, choice. We also go through the news of the week. Now, we're going to do that, gentle listener. Don't worry about it. I have all kind of stuff. But I want to deal with 4 major issues. A couple of themes, but 4 major news issues. So I'm going to get through some of the fluff I have, some of the smaller news stories that I've kept note of throughout the week for you, and they're going to be in there. You'll enjoy them. They're going to be spectacular, each more award-winning than the last. But I'm going to give a lot of them short shrift because I want to get to some big stuff. Let me explain to you what I mean. I'll start from last week. And by the way, if you want to start texting me about these big issues, you know what? I'll get rid of this suspense. We're going to talk about Uber. And then from Uber, we're going to talk about abortion. I know it sounds like it's an impossible segue, but we're going to win a lot of awards for it. Just stay with us. So it's going to be Uber and then abortion. Then we're going to touch on the issue of slavery, and then we're going to deal with what happened in Tennessee with the shooting. So those are the 4 issues: Uber, abortion, slavery, and Tennessee. Parentheses, terrorism. Those are the 4 things. So you can text me. I'm not going to give it again. You can text me at 71010. You can call if you're listening live. If you're listening to the podcast, just enjoy and you're welcome. But you can call. But this, I'm telling you, folks, I got a lot to get through and not enough time and what to do it. So if you call, we always say you got to be radio gold. This episode, you better be radio platinum if you want to get on the air. 416-872-1010 or Star Talk, star 8255. On any of those 4 topics, be ready. Uber, abortion, slavery, and the terrorism attack in Tennessee. Okay? But like I promised, let's get through some of the filler stuff, and then we'll deal with the big issues. Okay? Here's an example. Sunday of last week, a $1 million reward was offered for the return of the ruby slippers that Judy Garland wore in The Wizard of Oz. They were stolen 10 years ago. I didn't even know they were stolen. When I first saw that news story back last Sunday, I thought, oh, you know what? I better do a whole thing, a whole Judy Garland theme or Wizard of Oz. But this is all I'm going to say. I don't want to talk about the ruby slippers. $1 million reward. They're missing. They were stolen 10 years ago. And on Sunday, someone offered $1 million. So if you have the ruby slippers, cash in. But I'm not going to say anything more. Not important enough. On Monday, Harrison Ford, that is to say Indiana Jones, Han Solo, whatever, had a birthday. He turned 73 years of age. Okay? I don't care that much. You see? I could do a big thing on this, but I got such important stuff. Also on Monday, somebody called 50 Cent declared bankruptcy. Here's the move. I could have done a whole 50 Cent theme because 50 Cent, that's how you're supposed to say it, by the way. You may not know that. 50 Cent, this rapper mogul guy, declared bankruptcy. What happened was he was sued for $5 million for posting online some sort of sex tape of him and somebody else's girlfriend or wife, lost the suit, and then declared bankruptcy. There's no way this guy don't have see, I can speak urban sometimes. There ain't no way 50 Cent don't have $5 million. He does, but he's, in my opinion, the guy not only is so huge that I know who he is, but he also, he was like on the ground floor of Vitamin Water. He's invested in this, that, the other. The guy's made a fortune. There's no way he spent it all. He's younger than I am, I think. He hasn't blown it all. He's got the money. But again, I could have done a whole show on 50 Cent, but two things. One, I got more important stuff to get to, as I'm telling you. And second, I don't even know a single song by 50 Cent. That's the weird thing. Some of these guys, some of these rapper guys, I know exactly who they are. I know 50 Cent from hanging around with Floyd Mayweather Jr. I know who he is. And I thought, I could do a 50 Cent show. I don't know a single song. Do they even call it a song? Is it a song? Is it a joint? Is it what do they call a rap number? Is it a number? I don't know. Okay. So that's the kind of thing I mean. The Ruby Slippers, Harrison Ford, 50 Cent. I don't care because I got big stuff to get to. And here's the first big one right now. And it's going to lead us right into Uber. You don't think it will, but it will. This happened on Monday. Now, I've told you there are only 5 people who might be president of the United States after next year's election. Only 5. They are as follows: Hillary Clinton, Martin O'Malley, Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, or this guy. And if I had to bet, and in some sense, I guess I am betting, I'd say this is the guy who's going to be president after the next year's election. His name is Scott Walker. He's the governor of Wisconsin. Now, on Monday, Scott Walker officially made his candidacy official for the presidency of the United States. He announced, okay? Now, this is going to take us to Uber. Wait, you'll see. It's going to be award-winning. Now, I think Scott Walker, if I had to guess one person, is going to be the president after next year's election. Now, maybe it'll be Jeb. I don't know. Maybe it could be Hillary, God help us all. But I think it'll be Scott Walker, okay? Now, a couple of things happened. First, he announced. Everyone knew he was going to announce. Then, Scott Walker was asked to comment on Donald Trump. Now, I don't know how much Donald Trump, I'm looking at a CNN screen here in the studio as I speak to you. There's Donald Trump shows us the money. CNN, they're covering Donald Trump wall to wall. It's probably been talked about on this station, Donald Trump. And there's controversy over what Donald Trump said about immigrants to the United States. He said a lot of bad stuff about them, legal and illegal. He clarified his comments, but he said some bad stuff, okay? Or at least controversial stuff that got people upset. And you also know that Donald Trump's at the top of a few polls, which are irrelevant at this point. Here's what happened. Scott Walker, as every Republican will be demanded to do, was asked to comment on Donald Trump's remarks, right? Because the guy, he's a 2-term governor of Wisconsin, an incredibly successful governor. He's the odds-on favorite, in my opinion, to be president of the United States. But this is what happens to Republicans. It doesn't have to be Donald Trump. If some yutz running for alderman out in Mud Creek, Oregon, who happens to be a Republican, says something intemperate, you know that every major Republican running for president is going to be called on the carpet and demand to respond to it. Okay? And that's what happened with Scott Walker. But at the same time, Bernie Sanders, who's running against Hillary Clinton, he can say insane things about women and their sex fantasies and everything else. Do you think Hillary Clinton's ever going to have to answer a question about crazy pants Bernie Sanders? No. Because the way the media works is they take the hatchet to Republicans and guilt by association. But here's what Scott Walker did, and this is one of the reasons I think Scott Walker is going to be president. He said, you know something? Donald Trump can speak for himself. I don't have to defend Donald Trump. I don't have to stand here and tell you. That last Donald Trump, you got a problem with what he said about immigrants. That's what a leader looks like. He says to the media, take one in your hat, guys. I don't have to play your game. So I like this guy, this Scott Walker. He's the guy in Wisconsin they tried to recall. And he not only won the recall election, he won it with a higher percentage of the vote than he got elected governor in the first place. Now, what does this have to do with Uber and choice and driving and getting around and the theme of tonight's broadcast? Well, gentle listener, I'll tell you. On that very same day that Scott Walker, governor of Wisconsin, I believe the future president, announced his candidacy, Hillary Clinton, the prohibitive frontrunner for the Democratic nomination, and frankly, if you look just quantitatively, the person most likely to be president, she gave a speech. An economic policy speech. I know, it's hard to believe that she has economic policy. Honestly, it's like Justin Trudeau giving a speech on rocket science, but whatever, it happened. Hillary Clinton gave a speech on economics. And she didn't mention Uber by name, but she talked about the so-called gig economy. I kind of like the term, the gig economy, where people, like people who sign up to be Uber drivers or people who are part of other things like, all these different apps and websites where you can volunteer your tools or your handyman skills or Lyft or Uber, where people work on their own schedule, doing their own thing. They serve a market that exists. And she was saying how worrying it is and how troubling it is and how bad it is. The idea that we don't have jobs, solid, 9 to 5, 1930s jobs. Gentle listener, I've said to you before that so-called progressives, which is what the left used to call themselves before they started calling themselves liberals, and now everyone has forgotten what the progressive era was really about, so they call themselves progressives again. Progressives don't believe in progress. Someone like Hillary Clinton, a progressive, someone on the left, finds something like Uber, which is nothing but people coming together with supply and demand in what we're now calling, if you don't want to call it the gig economy, the sharing economy. Aren't the left supposed to be about sharing? Well, things like TaskRabbit and Uber and neighbor goods where people can borrow stuff, these apps are about a sharing economy. It's the stuff the left's always been telling us they're in favor of. But no. The left, personified by Hillary Clinton, you know what they're about? They're about control. They're about regulations. They're about pensions. They're about finding a way to be in charge of your life. We talked about this last broadcast. So when Hillary Clinton, the prohibitive favorite for the Democratic nomination, quite possibly the person who's going to be president of the United States, if I'm wrong, if it's not Scott Walker, she's upset that people across America and across the world are finding a way to do business with each other through Uber. Because she doesn't believe in choice. When they say they believe in choice on the left, they mean in one thing. And we're going to talk about that later on in the broadcast. But you know what they don't mean? They don't mean choice as to how you get from A to B, where your kids go to school, what words you're allowed to use. They're never in favor of choice. Now, in a moment, we're going to come back. And we're going to bring this live and local because Uber's a big deal here in this town, in Toronto, elsewhere in Canada, and across the United States. And it's a matter of choice. It's a matter of what kind of economy do we want to have. And it is a matter, once again, of the left being behind the curve and that the New Deal being the same deal. And they never want progress no matter what they tell you. This is Theo Caldwell.
Listening to Theo Caldwell on News Talk 1010.
Yeah, you are. And the theme of tonight's broadcast is just this. Drive my car, man. Getting around. Making choices, right? Yeah, it's about something prosaic, like getting in a car or letting someone drive you from A to B. We're talking about Uber versus taxis and economic policy as relates to the new sharing economy or the gig economy. So look, yeah, we're talking about something like cars. It's a simple thing. But I'm extrapolating, as we do on this broadcast, in award-winning fashion, to say to you that once again, what you're being told is the exact opposite of the truth. Progressives like Hillary Clinton, like Toronto City Council, and I'm about to get to one city councillor in particular, progressives, the left, are not about progress. They don't want something like Uber, where people can choose when they work, how much they work, who they work for. They don't want that. They want you and everybody else to have a job that they can regulate, that they can have their fingers in, that they can control. And I think Uber is a great case study in how people who would reflexively say to you they're pro-choice about one issue in particular are absolutely not about choice. They don't want you to have any choices. That's liberals for you. There is nothing in modern liberalism about liberty because they don't believe in letting you have liberty. And I'm going on this high horse because Hillary Clinton made a speech this week. She's the prohibitive favorite to be president of the United States, and she damned what she called the gig economy, where through something like Uber or TaskRabbit or neighbor goods or whatever, you can decide how much you work and what you want to do, and you can make your own life, and you don't necessarily have the same old jobs with the punch card, morning Al, morning Sam, like in the old days. Because for leftists like Hillary Clinton, the economy must never progress past the 1930s. It's always got to be Social Security just as it is. It's always got to be, union jobs, even though nobody wants to be part of a union anymore. It's always got to be industries that can be regulated and controlled. Now, let's bring it live and local. Let's bring it here to Toronto to somebody I got a bone to pick with. Now, on this broadcast, I have said lots of times, I like the Uber, I believe in the Uber. I hear from you on the text board, by the way. I see the text coming in. You can text me at 710 if you're 71010 if you're listening live. And I can tell you, I like the way the Uber works, and the more I've looked into how the motivations of the people on the side of the taxi industry who hate Uber, who want to stop Uber, the more I say to myself, oh my goodness, bring Uber on. It is phenomenal. In fact, I would commend to you an article I saw in the Globe and Mail this week. It's by a guy named Peter Cheney. Read this article, Globe and Mail, Peter Cheney. It's about, I'm not going to read it all now and go through it, but Globe and Mail, Peter Cheney, spelled like the former vice president. It's about the nefarious nature of the taxi system in Toronto, and I'm sure it's like that all over the world in major cities, with the medallion system and the leasing of medallions and how hard drivers have to work and how a few people control the entire operation. That's why you're getting so much pushback against Uber here in Toronto and elsewhere in the world. Now, let me talk about what's happening in Toronto with Uber. There's a Toronto City Councilor, you probably heard about him this week on this station, and otherwise, I would really think it was weird if you knew this guy, because you're just way too involved if you know city councilors this well. But whatever. The guy's name is, I'm not going to say it right, I've been practicing all week, but Jim Karagiannis. Okay? Jim Karagiannis. That's how it's spelled. And he stood up and gave a whole bit about Uber. Okay? It was so awful I can't even begin to go on. But here's what he said. He threatened people who are in this city for the Pan Am Games, and threatened them, saying, if you ride in Uber, you can be fined between $300,000 and $20,000. Now, there was a statement he gave, and then I watched him standing at a podium, and this is the thing. If not the sentiment of threatening visitors to our city, and referring to Uber drivers as bandits, as he did, the way he put it, he said they're not going to go after the drivers, he said. They're going to go after the passengers. He said the drivers are off the hook, the passengers are into the frying pan. To mix metaphors that hideously, that alone is problem enough. Are you kidding me? The idea that nothing else, if you can't get a sentence out, like it was a prepared statement, off the hook into the frying pan. But anyway, you're threatening people who are coming to our city. I mean, this Pan Am Games has been difficult enough. Threatening them with fines if they decide they are going to try to use Uber. As again, something that if you do believe in choice, if you do believe in a free economy and people making their own choices, you absolutely ought to be on the side of Uber. And I recommend you read Peter Cheney's article in the Globe and Mail about the taxi cab system in Toronto, because I believe that will illuminate for you, as it did for me, gentle listener, a lot of the motivation behind the people who are so vociferous and nasty, quite frankly, in their opposition to Uber. Now, on the other side of it, I quite liked seeing on the news on our affiliate on CP24 that all kind of people have signed up for some Uber pool thing where they can use the high occupancy lanes. So they are not intimidated by Jim Karagiannis threatening them with between $300,000 and $20,000 fines just for using a service instead of using a taxi. But again, if you believe in choice, if you believe in a free economy, you ought to believe in Uber. And I'm surprised. I didn't expect this. I don't think anybody did. That at the local level, as I've just discussed with you, but also even in the presidential election in the United States, Uber is a shibboleth. Does a candidate believe in Uber? In which case they're a free market person, or they don't. In which case they're a statist, left-wing, old-time person like Hillary Clinton. I'll say one more thing. Jeb Bush, one of the 5 who I think could be president next year, a friend of this program, Jeb Bush took Uber to a campaign stop in San Francisco this week, and the driver didn't know who the hell he was. I love that. But Jeb Bush, to prove a point, Jeb Bush took Uber to get someplace. All right. I want to move on from this. I want to segue into the element of choice because something hideous happened this week. I'm going to have like a real quick fight with somebody, though. Bill, go for Theo.
Uber, does the average Uber driver actually pay taxes?
Yes.
They do?
Yes.
You're sure they pay taxes?
But I'm not auditing.
I've met a couple that don't.
Okay.
And my biggest problem is if you're going to do a service, not pay taxes, you better be paying taxes on actually using the roads, at least.
Well,
and the gig economies I'm really scared of are just the legitimizing of underground economy. This is really what's going to happen. And that's what Hillary's most upset about. And Theo, I am a long way from a leftist.
Okay.
But I believe in a legacy taxes that people have to pay to make a country run.
That's fair enough. Now, if you and I, Bill, if we had a more fulsome discussion, I'd go back and forth with you about what kind of taxes should exist. But you mentioned the taxes to pay for the road. Now, everybody who drives a car, whether their own car, Uber, taxi, they're contributing because they're paying a gas tax. As a matter of fact, we just increased the gas tax in this country. So they're absolutely on a consumption basis paying taxes. Now, as to whether they declare the income, Uber drivers that you asked, as Uber drivers, well, look, anybody who makes an income that isn't necessarily documented in a T5 or something else, our tax system largely here in the United States works on an honor system. So you might as well say, do waitresses and bartenders declare their tips? Well, they should. I believe that they do, because you're right, Bill. If we're going to have a system where you're supposed to declare certain kinds of income, we all need to pitch in. I can't tell you for sure if everybody does, any more than I can tell you the people across the street at the ballroom or Jack Astor's declare all their tips. But they ought to. That is the system, and they're no less likely not to than a cab driver not declaring his own tips. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
All right, buddy. Thank you so much for the call, Bill. I don't want to do this too much because I'm getting texts about like I'm saying stuff, and then which I'm more than happy to debate, as I think I've just done with Bill. I'll debate what I said. I'll absolutely debate what I said. What I will not debate is what you, gentle listener, wish I said, because it would make your side of the argument easier. I haven't said no regulations, no standards, no anything else. What I have said is, if people have a demand and are willing to supply for that demand, as in the case of Uber or all the other elements of the gig economy or the shared economy, if you're really an agent of progress, you ought to be on board with that. Now, what does all this have to do with abortion? We're going from a sort of a lighter topic to something heavy and serious like abortion. Well, the question is, are you pro-choice? Are you pro-choice? We're going to find out in a second. This is Theo Caldwell. We'll be right back.
This is Theo Caldwell on In-Depth Radio, News Talk 1010.
It is the one and only Theo Caldwell. And look, this song, Fine Young Cannibals from 1989, before Hillary Clinton rose to national prominence, she does drive me crazy. She does. It's the theme of the broadcast, driving, craziness, and choice. Look, before the break, we were talking about Uber, okay? And I was saying to you how if a politician, be they a big-time, internationally known politician like Hillary Clinton, or I guess Jeb Bush and Scott Walker and the others are getting there, if they're in favor of Uber, if they understand what Uber represents in the sharing economy or the gig economy, then you know what? I think that they at least have a potential to be an agent of progress. They understand that people should be able to come together and do business without the government or regulators getting their fingers in between it. And I asked, are you pro-choice? And I talked about Jim Karagiannis, and I'm not saying, yeah, it's close enough. Jim Karagiannis, city councilor here in Toronto, who threatened visitors to Toronto, saying, you're going to get fined if you try to take Uber. And honestly, what a guy. Welcome to Toronto, do as we say. And this is what I mean, a left-wing nightmare. A politician, one of these people I've talked about on previous broadcasts, who just, they lie awake at night thinking that people might be doing something that they're not somehow in charge of, or regulating, or making rules about, or collecting taxes on, or collecting perhaps donations from. Okay? And I'm getting texts, by the way, I don't know this. But I'm getting texts about where the donations to Jim Karagiannis's campaigns have come from. I don't know. I don't care. Guy's wrong. I don't care if he's being paid to be wrong or if he's genuinely wrong. I don't care. I think if you, first of all, threaten people coming to visit our town to say you can't use Uber or we'll fine you, I think you're a lousy ambassador for the city. I don't care if you're being paid that way or whatever. But you're also just wrong about how life works and how a city functions properly, which is, as I say, millions of people making different choices. And if one of them is to work as an Uber driver or to hire an Uber driver, fine. Can't you just leave stuff alone? As I say, the political philosophy of this program, less government. I'm getting texts from people saying, you're preaching chaos, no standards, no regulations. It's the first time. It happens all the time. When a guy like me, from the right, or libertarian if you want to call me, I'm more of a fusionist. When a guy like me says to you, there should be less rules, less regulation, it's the first time so many people have ever heard that. Because they just can't imagine it. Because we're so marinating in leftism nonsense. The government needs to step in. As though it's the government who decides what's safe, what's right, what's good. And it isn't. Leave it alone. So people don't understand. I had somebody say to me when I mentioned unions, I said people like, taxis and Hillary Clinton who want you to all have a union job, they can regulate and everything else. Somebody said, well, unions brought us out of slavery. Really, I had no idea that Abraham Lincoln was a teamster. Extraordinary stuff. Very silly. So I just think people should be allowed to choose to do business with each other or not. I think people in life generally ought to be allowed to choose, which brings me to a major story that happened this week. And I genuinely don't know how much it was talked about on this station. I don't. I don't think it was talked about all that much on some of, I mean, we're a huge company, so Bell, on some of our news affiliates. But I'm going to talk about it right now because however much it was talked about, it wasn't talked about enough. And it's this. On Tuesday of this week, the senior medical director of Planned Parenthood in the United States, her name is Deborah Nucatola. That's how I think it's pronounced. She was caught on hidden video over lunch, discussing nonchalantly the harvesting of organs from aborted babies and selling them. Now, they use all kinds of euphemistic terms, fetal tissue, they call it, and repurposing and using it for life-saving research. But this woman, this Deborah Nucatola, this utterly damning video. Excerpts were released on some news outlets, and the entire tape is not exculpatory, I assure you. And she's sipping away at wine and whatever, talking about, I'd be careful to crush here and crush there because a lot of people want liver and heart. It is the most galling, upsetting, disturbing piece of video. And it's not just the things this woman at Planned Parenthood, which provides more abortions than any outlet in the United States. 40% of the abortions in the United States is done by Planned Parenthood. They receive about $500 million in taxpayer money a year from the federal government. And she's just nonchalantly talking about how they abort babies, but they're careful not to damage the parts that want to sell elsewhere. I urge you, I don't know if it's on our website, but it's out there. Deborah Nucatola, the senior medical director of Planned Parenthood, go look at it. Go watch this video. Go listen to what this woman said, and then don't you ever again tell me that abortion is about reproductive health or a right to choose or anything else. Now, this week, this happened Tuesday, this video was released, and I've read an awful lot of commentary about it where I could find it. But what I was stunned is that this is not absolutely front page news everywhere. Because, one of the reasons that in the United States and in Canada, abortion is just so accepted, or at least was, and I think the trend is going the other way, is that it's so bathed in euphemism. They call it a medical procedure, or how do you feel about choice? Or they say it's about health. Really? Health? It's not about health at all. And when it comes to something like this, when it comes to something like this woman admitting that they harvest organs of the babies that they abort, that ought to close it for good. I want to say a few things about culture and politics regarding this. I said to you before on issues like gay marriage and elsewhere, culture is more powerful than politics. What we believe as people, among ourselves, the consensus, if you will, among those of us walking around, it matters more than what laws we write. Now, we've seen rapid, sweeping culture shifts recently regarding gay marriage. And the Supreme Court in the United States found in the Constitution the right to gay marriage, not because it's in the Constitution, but because the culture had already moved there. The culture makes the move. I believe and hope that a similar sweeping change is coming with regards to abortion. Stuff like this video with this Deborah Nucatola talking about harvesting babies' organs, stuff like 3D abortion, 3D ultrasound imaging so we can see what a baby is. Forget the media obsession, journalism and TV and movies. They're always obsessing about conservatives, going after conservatives and Republicans, saying that they hate women and insisting that if you elect a conservative, they're going to turn into the town elders from Footloose as soon as they get into office. Forget them. That's not what's important. Politics is irrelevant to this. We're talking about a culture that allows this, that can see a video, can see a woman like Deborah Nucatola ostensibly providing health care, talking about dismembering babies and selling the parts. A lot of people in the analysis of this over this past week have said in the United States, it's illegal to jaywalk. It's illegal to smoke in a bar that you own. It's illegal to make a contribution to a political candidate without first informing the government. But what you can do is abort a baby, take the parts, and sell them. And that's what Planned Parenthood does. And their apologists in the Democratic Party and on the left say, oh, it's whatever, it's for health, it's life-saving, it's this, it's that. Are you kidding me? What does it take for people who insist that they're all about choice and about life to admit that this is evil and this has gone too far? Now, I have zero interest in changing the law about abortion. You know why? Because I think by the time you change the law, it's irrelevant. What I think has to happen is the culture. So those of you who ask me, well, do you think you ought to make it illegal for a woman to have an abortion? No, I do not. I think you ought to make it clear what it is that's happening. Just let's be honest about what it is. And I think this what happened Tuesday, where the senior medical director of Planned Parenthood said exactly what they do with the babies that they abort. That makes it pretty clear. That cuts through all the euphemism that abortion apologists put forward. Now, Abraham Lincoln, I mentioned him a minute ago. Abraham Lincoln believed that the Civil War in the United States, in which 650,000 Americans died, give or take, 650,000, he believed that that was divine punishment for slavery. Now, if that is true, if you believe that sort of thing, what would be the divine punishment in the United States for the 54 million aborted babies since Roe versus Wade in 1973? Okay. Some of you may be following me with this analogy. Some of you may not. When I mentioned slavery earlier, I said we're going to go from abortion to slavery. Here's how. The fundamental question that we have to ask ourselves, those of us examining the issue of abortion, the ubiquity of abortion in the United States and Canada over the last 40 plus years, we have to ask ourselves what people who defended slavery had to ask themselves 150 years ago, and that's this. Whom do you consider to be a human being? Back in the 1860s, they had to decide, do you consider black people to be human beings like you, or can they be property? That was the question of slavery. Who's a human being? Who merits the dignity and the right to life, liberty, and happiness that a human being gets? Do black people merit it? And of course, they fought a war over it. So you have to ask yourself, in today's day and age, whom do you consider to be a human being? Do you consider a baby that's not yet born a human being? And if you do, and if you, for example, through 3D ultrasounding or through real examination and cutting through the scientific euphemism to really determine what abortion is, if you believe that that unborn baby is in fact a human being, meriting of human dignity, then are you not obligated to decide that abortion is wrong? Forget the law. Forget the law. What is legal and what is moral are not necessarily the same thing. It doesn't matter. And that's what people said about this Deborah Nucatola, this director of medical stuff at Planned Parenthood. Oh, well, nothing that she describes is illegal. Oh, well then, if it's not illegal, who cares? Slavery was once legal. I don't care if it's legal. I'm talking about you, gentle listener. What do you believe? Are you pro-choice? Really? Because if you believe that a baby who could live outside the womb doesn't deserve to come into this world, you know what you're doing? You're taking away every choice that person is ever going to have. Are you happy with that? Think about it. This is Theo Caldwell. We'll be right back.
More from Theo Caldwell on News Talk 1010.
That, of course, the theme from Taxi. Judd Hirsch, Danny DeVito, Andy Kaufman, Mary Lou Henner, Tony Danza, for some reason, and me, Theo Caldwell. So before the break, we were talking about, well, if you just, rewind if you're listening on. I was talking about Uber at the beginning of the broadcast, and then I talked about choice, and then I talked about abortion. Like, it's an obvious, if you look at it, it's an obvious dialectic. And I was getting a little hot under the collar. I'm actually surprised at myself. We like to have a little bit more fun in this broadcast, but I got a little angry about abortion. And I told you about this senior medical director, this Deborah Nucatola, talking about harvesting organs from aborted babies. She's the senior medical director of Planned Parenthood. And I want to wrap this topic up and move on to the rest of the news. But I want to say this. I think the future generations will look back on this era of abortion on demand, of not even just lying about it, but just euphemistically pretending everything is fine, and the 54 million abortions that have happened in the United States since Roe versus Wade. I think history will look back on this era with revulsion, and I think that they should. Once you sweep through all the euphemism, as this hidden video of Deborah Nucatola of Planned Parenthood did, you realize that abortion is a moral horror. Forget the law. I'm not saying make it illegal. Just let's be clear about what it is. I want to say one other thing. I talk a lot here and in print and in columns. I just want to say that I have said that so-called straight news people who say, I don't have an opinion, I'm a straight news person. I hear that all the time. I've heard it every place I've ever worked. And I think it is just bollocks on stilts. I really do. Because everybody has an opinion. And maybe you don't overtly state your opinion as I am doing now. because this is my task, is to give you my opinion and to hear yours. But you have one, and it is evinced through the way you choose to report things. For example, a week ago, we were getting breeze on the station that we theoretically, according to some people, didn't cover this climate justice lefty march in Toronto that had 10,000 people. And we did cover it, but we didn't cover it enough for the liking of some people. We were accused of all kinds of biases because we didn't cover wall to wall 10,000 people walking down the street in Toronto for climate change. And so I talked about it and I dealt with it. Every year, 1 million people march to the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. 1 million people protesting against abortion. 1 million a year. Every year. It's an annual event. And every year, the major news outlets don't say a word about it. They don't cover it. You never see anything. So don't talk to me about how we didn't cover 10,000 people talking about global warming in Toronto. When 1 million people march once a year in protest of abortion and the major news networks don't cover it, and don't straight news person tell me you have no opinion when you don't talk about that. And this, what I'm telling you now, that I want you to go watch, this video of Deborah Nucatola, the senior medical director of Planned Parenthood, talking about harvesting babies' organs, go look at it. And tell me, by the way, you can text me at 71010, you heard about it on the news? You hear about it much? Because it's a big deal. And that is where you see the bias of the media. That's what left-wing bias is all about. Here endeth the lesson. Okay, I'm going to finish the news of the week now in award-winning fashion. And we're going to get to Tennessee, the horror of Tennessee. This has not been an upbeat broadcast. It's been heavy-hitting and award-winning, but it's not been as much fun as we usually have. But it's the serious stuff, right? We're not just here to make jokes. Although I may make some at the end, but it's not. Now is not the time. Too soon. So, Tuesday, the Iran deal. The Iran deal between the P5+1 and Iran, it was announced on Tuesday, okay? And here's another media bias problem that I have. I watched the Canadian coverage and the U.S. coverage of this deal that Barack Obama is pleased with, the Iran mullahs are definitely pleased with. And I watched the way it was reported on the crawls and everything. You know what it said? This deal will prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon in 10 years. Really? That's what you think? And it was amazing the way news outlets reported exactly the same thing as Barack Obama said about the deal. You had to look to find analysis that said what really happened with this Iran deal. And that is this. It basically guarantees that Iran is going to get a nuclear weapon within 10 years, if not sooner. There's no meaningful inspections of Iran's nuclear facilities. That is to say, they can request to inspect an Iranian nuclear facility, but Iran can say no for a month and appeal. It's a mess. This guarantees Iran is going to get a nuclear weapon. I don't care what you've seen on the news. I'm telling you, it might be the worst deal in U.S. diplomatic history. Now, we're always asked as hosts here on the radio, how does it matter to the listener? How does what you're saying matter to you? Why should I be talking about Iran? I'll tell you what, this could kill you. This might kill you. Because if Iran, an insane theocracy run by madmen, if they get a nuclear weapon, it's not like the Soviets having one. You can't do mutually assured destruction with crazy pants who think the 12th Imam is coming and want to kill you no matter what, and they think they're going to be martyrs if they do it. So when I say to you this Iran deal is bad, I'm not just going off on a highfalutin international issue. I'm telling you something, gentle listener, that you ought to know. This could kill you. This is really, really bad. And again, I watched the coverage of this, especially the Canadian news, which slants even further left than the American news. I was amazed how they just repeated the Barack Obama administration talking points about it like it was a great deal. It's a bad deal. And that happened on Tuesday with Iran. Watch this space. Also, okay, let's move on to Wednesday. Wednesday, I mentioned Donald Trump earlier in the week, earlier in the broadcast. On Wednesday, he actually did something that surprised me. He released his financial records. He claims to be worth over $10 billion. And he had to release his financial records because he's running for president. And as I further said, he's leading on some polls. Now, let me just dispense with Donald Trump right now. I've worked with a few news organizations, a couple different presidential cycles now, where they want me to take Donald Trump seriously. They want me to talk about him because I don't know, they think it's good news. Let me just help you out. He's not going to be president. He's not going to win a single primary or caucus. He's a crazy person. The more people, I mean, I know he's rich, but like he was born rich, okay? The guy was born on third base. He thinks he hit a triple. So he was born rich. He's absolutely out to lunch. And I don't know what you want me to do. Want me to pretend that he's a serious presidential candidate? He isn't. Anyway, he released his statement on Wednesday, his financial statement. Fine. Thursday, Greece approved an austerity message. Remember the last broadcast I was saying Greece, moral hazard? Doesn't matter. Greece is finished. They don't have enough people. The culture of dependency, they're done. Thursday as well. A petition was started. This I'm on board with. I don't like petitions. But a petition was started to block Kanye West from singing at the closing of the Pan Am Games in Toronto. Now, I also could have done a Kanye West theme broadcast tonight. We're doing driving. That's the theme of the music. But like 50 Cent at the beginning, I don't know a single song by Kanye West. Like, I know who he is. He's married to somebody, and he calls himself a genius and whatever. But quite honestly, I don't know a song by him. And I don't, as I said earlier, I don't know if a song is called a song. What is it? Is it a ditty? What do they call it? Or whatever, a rap thing. I believe he's a rapper. He's not a big band guy. I think he's a rapper. Okay, but anyway, Kanye West shouldn't be performing to close the Pan Ams. That's ridiculous. We can't get somebody Canadian. You know, we're the ones. We from Toronto, from Canada, we're paying for this Pan Am Games. We're the ones who can't get anywhere in traffic. We're the ones being threatened by Toronto City Councillor Jim Karagiannis that we're going to get fined if we try to take an Uber to get somewhere. But we can't have someone from our own country sing at the end of the thing. What about Drake, who I think, by the way, John Tory thought Drake was Kanye. I think that happened. That's a little embarrassing. But whatever. Get Drake. I don't care. Get the Bare Naked Ladies, for goodness sake. Get somebody. Get Brian out. Get Corey Hart. Dig him up wherever he is. But why do we, get somebody, get Anne Murray. A little snowbird in July. Why not? But the idea that we got Kanye West singing after we're the ones suffering through these games, that's crazy. There's like 40,000 people signed the petition. Get rid of Kanye. They're right. Let me go quickly through the last few things because I want to mention Tennessee. We're not going to bid in Toronto for the 2024 Olympic Games. Okay, great. So we get the Pan Am Games nobody heard of with the three-legged race and the egg and spoon, but we don't get the one we might want, which is the Olympics. So it's not going to happen. That was announced Thursday. Thursday, friend of this program, Tommy Taylor, announced that he is seeking the Green Party nomination for the federal election in the riding of Scarborough Southwest. Significantly, that's the one where Bill Blair, former chief of police, is running for the Liberals. Tommy Taylor has been a leading light in making sure nobody forgets what happened at the G20 back in 2010. He's running deliberately because he's running against Bill Blair. I hope... Look, I don't want the Green Party necessarily to do well. I certainly don't want Bill Blair to win, but good for Tommy Taylor. Hope he gets a nomination and wins. Now, let's talk about this thing in Tennessee. We've got a couple minutes left. In Tennessee, Muhammad Yusuf Abdulaziz from Kuwait, 24 years old, from Kuwait, this guy, he went to 2 U.S. military facilities in Tennessee. He shot and killed originally 4 people. Now a 5th has died, wounded some others. And it was clearly a Muslim terrorist attack, right? You know that. Everybody knows that. The FBI is saying there's no evidence. The FBI in the United States is saying there's no evidence. The guy is from Kuwait. He's clearly, he's a radical, and he's gone and killed people in Tennessee. The FBI in the United States won't admit it. On CNN, which only Canadians watch, Americans don't watch CNN, trust me. They had their so-called terrorism analysts saying, oh, we know that he's from Kuwait and that he might be Muslim. But we have no idea this is Muslim terrorism. You know something? This is why this program has said we're going to lose the war on terror. Because we don't believe in anything. Do we? Do we? Now, you know this guy. If he wasn't training in a camp, you know he was inspired by radical terrorist Islam. You know that, right? But why wouldn't he be? Compared to our society. People like Barack Obama, who will not admit when something is Islamic terrorism. I mean, Dylan Roof, the guy who killed everybody in South Carolina, all white people are supposed to be responsible for what he did. But somebody, clearly a Muslim terrorist, we have to deny his motivation. And we say things like, our ideas are better, so we're going to win. I don't think so. Ours is a culture that has aborted 54 million people in over 40 years. What do we believe in? Reproductive health, quote unquote? Climate change? Bruce Jenner? Why would we win this war? So a 24-year-old guy in Kuwait, a country that the United States liberated around the time this guy was born, he's walking around killing military personnel within the United States. And you know something else? Because we won't admit the kind of conflict that we're in. We have to politically correct stuff like the government surveilling you, reading your email, Bill C-51, the NSA. Instead of actually going after real threats, U.S. military have to be in gun-free zones, sitting ducks in their own country. I am on record as saying that political correctness and texting while driving are going to kill us all. this disaster in Tennessee, this horrific attack in Tennessee, could have been prevented. And we should at least admit in the aftermath what actually happened. The fact that we won't augurs purely for our future. But hope springs eternal. This broadcast would rather light a candle than curse the darkness. I believe we're going to embrace the gig sharing economy. I believe we're going to look back at this stage in history and realize, you know something? We were wrong. And the unborn are human beings entitled to human dignity and choices of their own. And I believe that the potential exists for we, as a people, to rise up and say no more. We're going to be free. We're going to admit and identify our enemy. We're going to take the proper precautions, and we're going to live free or die. Folks, you know what the music means. This has been an excellent broadcast. This is Theo Caldwell. Good night.